Hello, everybody. So the population of the United States is aging faster than it ever has before, with reports saying that by 2080, 1 out of every 4 Americans will be 65 years or older, which is unprecedented. So the question becomes, what is America and what is the Western world, which is aging, doing with the problem or the question of aging? The reality is euthanasia is on the horizon, with more people being euthanized in the last year than in any prior year reported. And some reports showing that people are being euthanized against their will. In today's episode of the Lila Rose Show, we are going to be exploring what this actually looks like and also how presidential candidate Gavin Newsom, presidential candidate to be Gavin Newsom, is involved with this as well. Welcome back to the Lila Rose Show. So as you all know, we've been following and we follow these dignity of life issues on the show. They're incredibly important. They're not talked about enough in mainstream media, but they matter because it's not just about the lives of unborn babies and the lives of children, but it's also about the lives of the elderly, the medically vulnerable, people with disabilities, and so many others. And there is right now a war happening that, again, not a lot of people know about in the legislature, in public policy, and in the court of public opinion to normalize suicide by doctor. Now, what is suicide by doctor? Well, suicide by gun or suicide by, self-strangulation, all these horrible things, you can see how the person's taking their life. Suicide by doctor is when the medical profession, whose job it is to care for patients and alleviate suffering and help protect life, is instead used to destroy life. And there's some very scary reports coming out of Canada about how this has just taken over the Canadian healthcare system by storm. It's funded by the Canadian government. We're going to talk about that, but it's not just happening in Canada. It's easy to look at Canada and be like, look at all the problems they have in Canada. It's happening here in the United States. And I think that one example of what it looks like and how it's been happening in the United States is actually in the words of Governor Gavin Newsom, California Governor Gavin Newsom, my governor here in the state of California. He has been in politics, obviously, for decades. He's preparing to run for president. He has a new book out called Young Man in a Hurry. All that set aside, I remember seeing this news about Gavin Newsom probably a few years ago by a book that was written. This was before he seemed to have presidential aspirations that were more public, about his life. And I remember reading this book, and I was so disturbed and saddened to learn about in this book about Gavin Newsom's history and learn about how he had a part to play in the illegal euthanasia, death by suicide by doctor, of his own younger mother. She was only in her 50s when she was killed via pills administered to her by Gavin and his family and a doctor. So I want to walk you through what this looked like, because I think the signs were all there. And the signs of what's happening in California, I think, is a warning bell for the rest of the country. But if we're not aware of what is happening, then it's going to take us by storm. And good people need to be aware of what is happening, because this is going to affect all of us. It's going to affect, of course, our grandparents, our parents. It will affect us as we're getting older. And it's connected back to the culture of death, which is what we're fighting against, which says that human life is disposable. Life isn't worth living. And that's, of course, the reason why we have 1 million abortions, the destruction of 1 million human children in the womb every single year in America. And that's done, of course, with the full consent of the law. So let's go to the story of Gavin Newsom. I want to first start with this clip from him. This is Governor Gavin Newsom in his own words talking about the death of his mother. Now, before we play this clip, I want to give you the background really quickly here. Gavin Newsom was raised effectively by a single mother. He has a sister in Northern California. This is where I'm from, so this hits very close to home for me. This is where I was born and raised. And Gavin Newsom was raised by a mother. She was 19 years old when her father married her. Now, Gavin Newsom's father was 32, so 13 years older. She was poor. She was from a lower socioeconomic background. when they got married, she obviously had 2 children. And then ultimately, Gavin Newsom's father would leave her because he had these very intense political ambitions, and he spent his money on these political ambitions. He had financial struggles. He ended up just abandoning ship. Gavin Newsom's mother would work as a waitress. She'd work as a bookkeeper. She'd have these odd jobs just to try to keep herself afloat. Gavin Newsom grew up with this as his whole life, right? And his mother herself grew up in tough circumstances. Her father was a veteran who ended up taking his life when she was a younger girl. So she experienced the suicide of her own dad as a child. A lot of trauma. Multiple times in Gavin Newsom's new book that he has out, he talks about how his mother was sort of like this silent. She was silent about her own upbringing, how she didn't want to talk to Gavin about her side of the family tree. She seemed to have a lot of trauma about her own childhood that she didn't want to discuss or she didn't want to talk about. So Gavin often would be left wondering about that side of the family tree, about her childhood, about what was going on. He, of course, knew about the suicide of his grandfather. All of this is the context now for what you're going to hear in this clip from Gavin Newsom, because ultimately Gavin was very inspired to follow in his father's footsteps and attempt a political career. He was very ambitious, and while he was hard chasing this political career, his mother was diagnosed with cancer. And let's take a look at the clip of Gavin Newsom talking about this, and then I'm going to compare this clip to how Gavin Newsom was talking about this as of a decade ago, because there's some differences even in the story of how he tells the story in terms of his presentation now in media and his new book, and then how he talked about it over a decade ago. Let's take a look at the clip.
I won't be around, so you may want to come next Wednesday because it will be my last day. Literally left a voicemail like that. I called my sister. I'm like, what the hell is this? She goes, she's crying. She said she just told me she's going to do an assisted suicide because it's so bad. She left a voicemail. And so that next week, I was there. My sister and I were in her room. Doctor comes in, gives her some, what turned out to be Oxycontin. I remember like early on, like, what are these pills? She had to take those an hour before he got there. She takes them. God, is my we're going through fucking photos like this, man. That's all she wanted to see. All the old photos of us growing up. And we're sitting there on my sister on the left, I'm on the right. My mom there took these pills, waiting for the doctor. And she's going through all these old photo albums of us growing up, talking about these moments. Yeah, come on, man. So, yeah. And, but wanted to be there for her. Doctor comes in, administers, and she starts gasping. My sister runs out. The doctor had already left. And I was like, she's gasping for air. And I'm just sitting there and holding her hand, and her last breath. And I just sat there. And my sister, no one walked in. I felt like for a day, it felt like hours, but it was just probably 10 minutes before someone finally came in. Just sitting there with my mother who passed away, and not realizing that moment, what it represented, what it ultimately meant.
So this is obviously so devastating to listen to. May the soul of Tessa, the mother's name of Gavin Newsom is Tessa, may she rest in peace. Again, people that choose to take their life, we don't know the fate of their soul because they could at the last moment before they die choose to repent of wanting to end their life. And there's all these obviously mitigating circumstances. So we don't know the fate, of course, of Gavin Newsom's mother. We pray for her. We should pray for her soul. We should, of course, continue to pray for Gavin Newsom, his conversion, for our own conversions. We all need to convert. But I'm sharing this because he's describing about the death of his mother. He also talked to the New Yorker about it's not just the death, it's the suicide. It's the assisted suicide of his mother. This is from the New Yorker, and this is from a profile piece, I believe, in 2018. So this is before he ended up doing the book that he has out now and the other pieces of the media he's doing now. This was called Gavin Newsom, the Head of the California Resistance. And this is how it's described here. He says, in May 2002, his mother decided to end her life through assisted suicide. Now, no, it wasn't legal yet. This is an illegal assisted suicide that they are about to do. So that's one thing to flag here that's usually not mentioned by the media. That Gavin Newsom, by being a part of this, is assisting ultimately in the breaking of a law. Most significantly, he's assisting in the death of his own mother, the killing of his own mother. But it says, Newsom recalled, she left me a message because I was too busy. Hope you're well. Next Wednesday will be the last day for me. Hope you can make it. I saved the cassette with the message. That's how sick I am. He crossed his arms and jammed his hands into his armpits. This is what the reporter is reporting that Gavin said to him in 2018, the New Yorker reporter. I have PTSD and this is bringing it all back, he said. The night before we gave her the drugs. I cooked her dinner, hard-boiled eggs, and she told me, get out of politics. She was worried about the stress on me. Now, later on, Gavin Newsom will not say we gave her the drugs, implying I'm part of this group of we. He'll talk about how the doctor over here gave her this drug and that he was just there to witness it. Regardless, he was witnessing a crime. He was witnessing a crime of something that was, yes, illegal, but most importantly, morally horrific. That his mother in destitution, she'd been abandoned by her husband, her ex-husband, Gavin Newsom's father. Her father had committed suicide. She was suffering. Gavin Newsom was very busy at the time campaigning, I believe, for mayor of New York. He was very busy in his life. He was preparing or had just married Kimberly Guilfoyle at the time. He had these huge political ambitions, and he was too busy to even call her back for a period of time. She was suffering ultimately alone after she had been diagnosed. She felt alone after being diagnosed with breast cancer. And what did he do? He chose to show up. But when did he show up? He showed up when his mother was about to be killed by a doctor and he was going to watch it. And I want to read for you what he described this as in his new book. So he actually describes in his book the process of watching his mother die. And it's absolutely devastating to read this. But this is from the Young Man in a Hurry book that he wrote. He says, in early 2002, the chemotherapy treatment stopped working and x-rays showed that the cancer had spread through mom's body. That spring, mom was determined not to suffer anymore, or more to the point, not to make her children further witness her suffering. So it was about her not wanting to ultimately be this inconvenience to Gavin and his sister. She planned her own assisted suicide, right down to the doses of morphine that would stop her breathing. She called and left me a voicemail, sounding only slightly miffed that I had not talked to her for a week. Before the dose was administered, she asked us to leave the room for a moment so she could be alone with our father. This is the ex-husband. They have some sort of conversation. I was standing at mom's left, holding one of her hands, and Hillary, this is a sister, was standing at her right. Her breathing began to labor, but it would not go shallow. When is the morphine going to work, she asked. These poor kids shouldn't have to witness this. Kids, I was 34 and my sister was 33. My sister couldn't bear it. She went to the other room. Had I known better, I would have left the room too. He's saying there was no peace that blanketed her. He says, there was no peace that blanketed her. This was not a peaceful death. She gasped and took a last breath. And I kept holding onto her hand tighter and tighter. What came next was a look on my mother's face that will never leave my mind. Now, I have a lot of thoughts about this, and I think this is so important to talk about because we're hearing from, again, someone who's the governor of one of the biggest states and the most, important states, I would argue, because it helps set the tone for the rest of the country in the United States, one of the biggest economies in the world, California, and he wants to be president of the United States. And he's talking about how his mother committed suicide, his own feelings about it, and you can see there's a lot of turmoil that he even feels about it, but nowhere, not once, is any kind of acknowledgement that this is wrong. That the reason there's no peace, the reason it's so brutal and horrible is because it's wrong. It's wrong to kill your mother. It's wrong to watch someone kill your mother. It's wrong to watch her gasp for breath because somebody just gave her pills that were going to kill her. Like, this is wrong. Strikingly, instead of Gavin Newsom becoming an advocate for protecting life and providing better palliative care for people suffering or hospice care for people suffering to alleviate suffering, Gavin Newsom would go on to not only be part of an illegal assisted suicide of his own mother, but he would go on to ultimately permit legally, expand the permissions legally in the state of California for assisted suicide. As governor, Newsom signed legislation in 2021 that reduced the waiting period. So Jerry Brown, a prior governor to Gavin Newsom, would actually legalize assisted suicide after this illegally happened with his mother taking her life and the doctor helping to kill her. But then later on, Gavin Newsom would, in 2021, reduce the waiting period for life-ending drugs from 15 days to 48 hours. So within 2 days, someone could feel like, I'm suffering, I want to die, or I'm a burden, I want to die, and then basically pay a doctor to come and kill them within just 2 days. Think about when someone receives a horrific diagnosis, they might feel fearful, not know what to do, not feel supported, and they might feel desperate, and so they might want to take their life. Instead of getting therapy and counseling and spiritual support, the state of California is now saying, 2 days, we will send somebody to help kill you. He also signed a bill, Gavin Newsom, to remove a sunset clause, making the law permitting assisted suicide legal, indefinitely. There's no sunset period. It's not going to stop, only be legal for 5 years or 10 years, making the law permanent in California. So why does this matter so much? It matters because of the life of Gavin Newsom's mother mattered. Her life mattered. His soul matters. The souls of everyone listening to this podcast right now matters. But it matters because it's the future of this country, and it's the future of the Western world as we know it. Because the reality is assisted suicide is on the rise. And a culture that looks at death, it looks at human life as not valuable, and looks as death as better than life, like it's good to die, we should die, not because of a spiritual reason we're going to go to heaven, but more because life is not worth living. A culture that sees that is a culture in a spiral of self-destruction. Now, before I go on to talk about the state of assisted suicide in the US, we're going to talk about Canada, we're going to talk about some of these crazy stories that you need to be aware of. I want to say one other thing. I was talking with one of our team members on our show, and she shared that her mother passed away recently from the same kind of cancer that killed Gavin Newsom's mother. Breast cancer that metastasized across their entire body. And this is a friend that loves God. Her mother loved God. And I said, I wanted to understand the mindset, right? Because I've known people who've suffered tremendously towards the end of their life. Maybe you've known those people too. And the whole reason to justify assisted suicide is, well, we're helping people who are suffering. We're helping them not suffer anymore by killing them, basically. So I asked her, did you guys ever feel tempted to want to do some form of assisted suicide or just end it? And she said, no, my mother was suffering a lot. Like this cancer is evil. It's horrific, right? It often involves tremendous suffering. But she said she wanted to live. She wanted to live for her grandchildren. And she ultimately had a faith, and she didn't want to die. She wanted to live. And I think about that story of this team member's mother and this, obviously the tremendous loss she feels over the loss of her mother and how much her mother wanted to live. Contrast with the life of someone like Gavin Newsom's mother. She was alone. She was living alone. She had no husband. Her own father had committed suicide. Gavin Newsom wasn't giving her the time of day. He was busy with his own ambitions. She did not have grandchildren. At least they're not talked about or in the picture as far as I'm concerned. They may have been there, but they're never talked about. She was suffering alone. And we're not meant to suffer alone. We can't do it. As human beings, we're meant to be loved. We need love, and we need to love. We need a place to put our love. We need a reason to live. So when we suffer alone, of course there's a temptation there that some people may face to want to take their own life, to want to give up. And so I'm just saying that on the outset here before we get into the data, because I want people to know, like, we need to have compassion for people suffering. Suffering comes for all of us in one way or another. Death will come for all of us in one way or another. But the solution is never to expedite death by destroying a life. The solution is always going to be to love, to provide more care, to provide more reasons to fight for life, and to provide more care for somebody who may be suffering greatly. That's palliative, to alleviate the suffering instead of to hasten death. Before we go on to look at the state of euthanasia in the US, there's some stuff that's pretty crazy that most people don't know. A huge thank you to the sponsors of this podcast. This Lent, join something truly life-changing. Hallow App's Pray 40 The Return. Pray 40 is a 40-day journey of daily prayer leading up to Easter. At the heart of this challenge is one of the most powerful stories ever told, the parable of the prodigal son. This journey draws from the brothers Karamazov, one of my favorite books and one of the greatest novels ever written. Hallow's new challenge begins Ash Wednesday, February 18th, and continues through Easter. You can join anytime. If you're ready to let go of what's weighing you down and get closer to God in your prayer life, get 3 months totally free today at hallow.com/Lila. That's all of Lent for free at hallow.com/Lila. Did you know that your health insurance plan likely covers abortion, abortifacients, and other unethical services? Most people have no idea that they're footing the bill for procedures that go directly against their beliefs. While there are health sharing ministries, some families need and want standard insurance. That's why I'm so excited to share about Presidio Healthcare, the nation's first pro-life Christian health insurance company. That's right, Christian health insurance, the first pro-life option that is not a health sharing ministry. If you're in Texas, visit presidiocare.com. That's PRESIDIO care.com to get your quote today. If you're in another state, you can join the wait list and check out Presidio's nationwide pro-life provider tool at prolifeproviders.com. Help bring life-affirming healthcare to the rest of the country. Go to presidiocare.com. All right, so there are 10 states in the US plus DC that permit assisted suicide. Let's check out this map here so you can see what this looks like. These are the states in the US that allow death by doctor. That's what I want to call it. It's death by doctor, suicide by doctor. So suicide by doctor is permitted in California. We talked about Gavin Newsom's mother, Tessa, even before it was permitted illegally, being killed by doctor via assisted suicide. In Oregon, Washington, you see all of these states. Now you see in some of these states, it's being pushed. Laws that are anticipated to come into effect in the year shown. So in the state of Illinois, in New York, they're supposed to be permitting death by doctor, suicide by doctor this year. And there's other states where they're pushing to permit suicide by doctor. So this is not just something happening in other countries. You hear about horror stories maybe in Canada or the Netherlands. It is coming to the United States and it is already here. There have been over 12,000 killings via suicide by doctor since euthanasia was legalized in the United States. So over 12,000 people that we know of have already been killed this way. In 2023 alone, this is the last reported year, 884 people in California were killed by being given lethal pills to kill them by their doctors. And we have knowledge now from reports coming out of Canada. Canada has been permitting assisted suicide by doctor for longer than the United States and allows state healthcare programs to pay for it. 90,000 Canadians have died through their medical assistance in dying program, or MAID. Now, this is the euphemism that's used to cover up suicide by doctor. This is what they're using to talk about it, to try to make it sound normal and helpful for people. Medical assistance in dying. You're already dying. We're just helping you die. No big deal. I want to tell you the story that came out recently of what this looks like for some people. There was an article out recently about the story of a woman in Canada. Let's pull this up. This was just a couple weeks ago. This is from, let me make sure you've got this, Harris, to pull up for us. Woman euthanized against her will after requesting palliative care in Canada. So a Canadian woman has died by euthanasia. No, she didn't die by euthanasia. She was killed. But it says, despite informing doctors just hours before that she wanted to stay alive. Now you learn more about this case and you discover that she was being taken care of by her husband. She was in her 80s. She had had some complications from a heart surgery that she had had and that she wanted to receive palliative care at home. Ultimately, her spouse wanted her to be assessed by the MAID program. He wanted her to be looked at. Can she qualify for it? So the husband specifically said that he was getting tired of being a caregiver, that he was exhausted by it. He's also an older gentleman. And so he requested that she be assessed. They said, oh yeah, she's approved. She said that she did not want to be euthanized. citing her personal and religious values and beliefs, and said she instead wants in-home care. After being denied in-home care, she was denied palliative care, which would help alleviate pain and care for her. Her spouse then went and requested suicide again for her. Now, she again said she did not want it. She wanted in-home care. Within days, that day, she was killed by a doctor. We don't know exactly how it went down, if they sedated her first and then murdered her. We don't know exactly what happened. But even this headline, woman euthanized against her will. No. She was murdered. She was flat out murdered by the healthcare system in Canada, by the doctor who killed her, and by her husband who was an accomplice. This is what's happening now in Canada. And we only know about this because reports were leaked that this happened, that she had said, no, I don't want this to happen to me. But you start to study some of these other cases and you find a similar thread where other people have expressed feeling pressure or coercion to also have their lives taken via suicide by doctor. I want to share with you some of these other stories. So here's an example. This is a veteran in Canada who was seeking mental health care and instead was offered suicide by doctor as a solution to his mental health care issues. So this was a Canadian Armed Force veteran who said that he was offered euthanasia by the basically Veteran Affairs Department of the Canadian government, who's supposed to give them war benefits. He had served 2 tours in Afghanistan. He was looking for support. He said it was his lowest point right before Christmas. So he's really struggling. You know, holidays can be really hard for people, especially if there's fractures in their family. And the Veteran Affairs Canada, the Affairs Department for the Canadian government said, I would like to make it a suggestion for you. Keep an open mind. Think about it. You've tried everything and it doesn't seem to be working. But have you thought about medically assisted suicide? And he was hurt by that. He thought, wow, the solution they're telling me is just go kill yourself. And he said, it seems to me that they just want us to be like, F this, I give up, this sucks. I'd rather just take my own life. Honestly, that's how it felt. Canadian veteran Kelsey Sharon says she knows almost a dozen former military servicemen who have been offered medical assistance in dying by Canadian authorities. Like, this is something that just one person knows of a dozen people. This is happening across the board, we can gather, in Canada. But it's not just veterans who are suffering from PTSD. It's people with disabilities too. Here's another story. Canadian disabled man's euthanasia request due to poverty approved. So this is a man who has a disability and, alongside the veterans being offered euthanasia for PTSD, this is a man who has a disability and he was afraid of falling into poverty. This is what the report says. A Canadian pensioner seeking euthanasia because he fears homelessness, admitting that poverty is a major factor in his decision to end his life. He was 65 years old and he said he doesn't want to die. He told them, I don't want to die. But he applied for MAID because he was afraid of being on the streets. Astonishingly, a doctor gave one of the 2 signatures necessary for this man to end his life, even knowing that it was financial hardship, not sickness, not terminal cancer, not some intense pain he couldn't bear. It was simply because he was poor. And that's why the Canadian government was about to sign off on death by doctor, suicide by doctor for this man. I mean, absolutely devastating. This man uses a wheelchair. So the state of his disabilities, he uses a wheelchair, but he says he's been able to live comfortably with his service dog, but now he is running ultimately out of money and afraid he can't pay rent and will be on the streets. And so this is now how Canada is handling it. Well, we will just give you some drugs and end your life. Here's another example of a man in Canada applying for the death by doctor program because he couldn't afford a home to live in. So this is another article that came out in the last few years. He couldn't afford a home. He had a disability. He was afraid of losing his housing. I mean, having a disability and being on the streets must be as a terrifying prospect. And he was able to ultimately reconsider. He said, I don't want to do suicide. Instead, he got other people online through GoFundMe to raise enough money for him to not have to leave his home. So it was literally $60,000 that he raised over GoFundMe so that he wouldn't have to leave his home. Here is one other story. This is a homeless man in Orillia, a part of Canada again, that again considered euthanasia because he was, again, on the streets, afraid of where he was going to live, wasn't sure of what to do. And so he was only 37 years old, an otherwise healthy, able-bodied working man. And he said, I'm afraid I'm going to end up on the streets. And so he was asked for and approved for death by doctor. Now, it's not just adults that are facing this. It's also coming for kids. So it's not just adults who say, I choose this, or even an old lady who said, I don't want this, and her husband and the doctor kill her anyways. It's children as well. They're calling it pediatric euthanasia, and recommendations are now being made in the Canadian House of Commons for Canada to allow MAID to be done at the will of the minor. So not only can parents potentially do it, but the child, if the child says, I want to die, then again, the doctor can be summoned to go and kill the child. Now, in all of these cases, what you're dealing with is the economic argument for killing an aging or disabled or poor population. That's what it is. There isn't even the compassion argument for their suffering. Instead, it's just, we don't have enough money and we don't want to care for our population, or they're just getting old and it's too much of a burden on other people. And so we should end their life. And that's literally what Canada is doing right now, actively. And there's so many more horror stories and cases. You can't even keep track of it because this is being done behind closed doors, and the people that are the victims of it are dead afterwards. They're killed. They don't have a story to tell. So we hear some of these stories here and there, but there are so many stories that we aren't able to tell on the show because the victim is dead. The child or the adult, in most of virtually all the cases, it's the adult, although they're, as I said, they're coming for the children, they're dead. So people are like, okay, well, Lila, that's Canada. Canada's crazy. That's horrible. That's really bad. But thank God that's not happening in the United States. No, my friends, it is going to be happening in the United States if we don't stop it from happening. And death by doctor is already happening in the United States. Think about the aging population in America. So right now, by 2030, in just a few years, all the baby boomers will be over 65 years old. That makes 1 in every 5 Americans retirement age. This is called an aging population, where demographically, the younger population, who's typically the working population, can't support the aging population. There's a shrinking ratio, unheard of before in our history, of working age adults to retirees, which means that there will be a strain on Social Security and Medicare, with projections indicating that there will be only 2.5 working adults for every older person by 2060. Now, why is that happening? Well, in the other end of life, we are killing 1 million babies in the womb, guys. We're killing our children. So there's no wonder that our population is aging. And we are seeing life because we kill so many babies, 3,000 babies every single day. It's no wonder we see life as disposable. Could we imagine that we're going to be able to kill babies at will like that and permit it and be normalized to that, and then not think that we're going to come for the older adults or the people with disabilities or the people who are struggling otherwise? How can we have a society that sees the dignity of people struggling, or the elderly or the sick, and who rejects the dignity of the baby? It's all connected. The Hippocratic Oath that doctors are required to take in order to be able to practice medicine includes the clause, do no harm. You shall not harm. Your job ultimately is just to care as the healthcare professional, as the doctor, as the nurse, whoever it is. But now the medical system, since abortion was legalized in 1973, has become weaponized against the weak. And they're not even sick usually. These are just babies that are seen as unwanted or inconvenient. That same healthcare system is being primed to be weaponized against the elderly, against the sick, against the disabled, and against sometimes the homeless or the impoverished who just don't have enough money to get by. This should terrify all of us. It's good to be afraid of this. And it's good to be very loud about this and upset about this. We should be talking about it. And the fact that Gavin Newsom is prepping to run for president, who is in part an author of assisted suicide in California, who at least you can say presided over, or who was an accomplice in, who assisted in the death by doctor of his own mother, who just wanted to be loved ultimately, who didn't want to be a burden, who wanted to have meaning in her life and was struggling so much. My prayer, by the way, is that Gavin Newsom wakes up and understands his life the way I believe is true, which is that that's a horrible thing that happened, not just because it's some tragedy like someone gets hit by a car, but because he wasn't there for her enough, and because she needed more of a reason to live, and she needed more support and help and care. And he can use that as fire in his belly to reject euthanasia, to reject abortion, to reject all these evil things that he has been promoting relentlessly as our governor. That's my hope. I do think that's possible, by the way. Gavin Newsom actually has Catholic roots. He had some religious roots that he obviously isn't living by, but I pray that for him, because I think he could be a champion for good if he's willing to see the light and do what's right. But this is serious, guys. And it's not popular or fun to sound the alarm on things like the killing of babies in the womb or the killing of the elderly in our healthcare system, but it is so important. So please join me in sharing this information, passing it on. What do we do about it? I think awareness is key. I think no compromise is key among people who care about human dignity, to say, no, we're not going to kill anybody. It's never right to take an innocent human life. And then I think it's helping each other out, loving our elderly community members, caring for children, putting them first, putting people first, always people first, not career, not our own selfish ambitions, always going out of our way to love people first. That is ultimately the way that Christians are called to live. And I think that's the way that any society needs to be for it to be able to flourish. So lots to unpack there. We're going to keep on covering this in our weekly lives and in future episodes. If you guys think I should do it, we'll keep on covering Gavin Newsom and his life story and what he's doing now in his pre-campaign to campaign for president. But I wanted to address one other thing, and then I'm going to take comments. So if you are talking in the chat right now, continue to leave comments or any questions. I will address the chat in just a few minutes. But I wanted to get to one other thing, which was the State of the Union and a new TV show that is out, and something that I saw that I thought, wow, that's crazy. We should all look at that and know what Hollywood is up to next. But briefly on the State of the Union, this was 2 nights ago. I watched it over dinner with my kids. It was chaotic and loud. I was paying very careful attention, though, to see if he had addressed abortion at all. No word on abortion, nothing said about it. This is, I think, President Trump's strategy. I'm just not going to talk about it. I don't think that works, though, because what he did talk about was IVF. He's been pro-IVF. This is his thing. Little, maybe not to the knowledge of most people, but IVF has led to 1 million children, embryos, human lives that are on ice right now. IVF is very dangerous for the child. Usually it's only 1 out of every 10 of those embryos make it out alive, make it to birth. And in addition, there are healthy solutions to infertility. Let's take a quick listen, though, to what President Trump had to say about IVF in his State of the Union address.
Here tonight is the very first customer ever to get that big discount, and it is big. Catherine Rayner. For 5 years, she and her husband have struggled with infertility, and they turned to IVF. One drug has been costing Catherine $4,000 to purchase, but a few weeks ago, she logged onto the Trump RX website and got that same drug that cost $4,000, got it for under $500. A reduction of much more, actually, than $3,500. Catherine, we are all praying for you, and you're going to be a great mom.
So it's obviously a very beautiful thing to encourage motherhood and fatherhood. That's all very good. Our military service members deserve support and help. Here's the thing, though. IVF is not the path. IVF involves often the destruction of innocent lives. There's 1 million of them frozen on ice. But there is a way, there is a solution that's ethical, that's actually really much cheaper than IVF. and that's restorative reproductive medicine, which we talk about on this show. We've had Dr. Lauren Rubal on, who used to be an IVF doctor, and she rejected that path because of how unethical it is, and she became a restorative reproductive medicine practitioner instead. You can help achieve pregnancy using RRM, which is ethical. It doesn't involve creating life in test tubes. It involves really working holistically on healing the body. That has been as successful as IVF in achieving pregnancy at like a fraction of the cost. And what is beautiful about restorative reproductive medicine is it fits very, very wonderfully into the MAHA movement, Make America Healthy Again, which interestingly, President Trump did not also mention at all in the State of the Union address, which I thought was a missed opportunity. But if you want to make America healthy again, we have chronic health issues in this country, some of the worst health outcomes we've had in decades, obesity, cancer, heart disease, all of these things. It's all connected back to a lack of holistic approach to our health. And the infertility crisis is very much dovetailed into all of that. But how do we solve it? Restorative reproductive medicine is the way. So that would be one thing I thought, this was a missed opportunity. They didn't talk about protecting human life in the womb. There's 1 million abortions a year. They're promoting IVF. We don't need IVF. We can promote restorative reproductive medicine. One good thing from the State of the Union I want to highlight, though, is the discussion of the Trump accounts. I do think this is a great pro-family policy. And Michael and Susan Dell, you might have heard, they're billionaires. They pledged $6.25 billion in December of last year to fund Trump accounts for approximately 25 million American children. Let's take a look at the part of the State of the Union where President Trump talks about Trump accounts. So this here is Michael and Susan Dell, and let's take a listen to what President Trump says about the Trump accounts.
Under our bill, parents like Megan can also activate their children's brand new Trump accounts. And I didn't name it. I did not name that. Nobody believes me, but I did not name it. It was named by a very tall man sitting right there in the third row. Nice man, a good man. Tax-free investment accounts for every American child. This is something that's so special and has taken off and gone through the roof. Millions will be pre-funded courtesy of the U.S. Treasury and private individuals like Michael and Susan Dell, who have donated $6.25 billion to fund the Trump accounts for 25 million American children. They're great people.
So I think this is awesome, and I'm actually I'm very inspired by the generosity of Michael and Susan Dell. I looked them up. They have 4 kids. They've been married over 35 years. They're this power couple. I don't know the rest of their politics, but I love what they're doing here, which is giving away $6 billion to 25 million American children to give them each a deposit of $250 in their Trump account to help it grow over time as they get older, like an early investment account basically for them. And I think this is beautiful. I mean, this is the focus, right? This is the kind of solution we need, is focusing, whether it's federal tax dollars or it's philanthropists, focusing on caring for the next generation. That is always the right way to go. Always. Instead of promoting abortion and Planned Parenthood and funding abortion and Planned Parenthood and funding, in Canada, the MAID system, suicide by death by doctor, the solution should be focused on making life better for families and for kids. That's what we should be doing. And it's really neat to see this couple step up and do that, and for President Trump to acknowledge them and to say this is a priority and to do this. Okay, one other thing I wanted to show you guys, which is, I don't really like most TV shows. Most TV shows today are terrible. Hollywood has gone completely the wrong track. There's some great standouts in TV and some good shows in TV. As an example, obviously The Chosen, we just had Jonathan Rumi on talking about his TV shows, The Chosen. So it's not totally a desert, but it's mostly a desert. So there's a new show out, or a new season of a show that's coming out called Tell Me Lies. If any of you watch it, well, here you go. This is what you're about to get. And unfortunately, Planned Parenthood is literally being hired by screenwriters in Hollywood to help write narratives that promote choice. But I want to have you take a peek into what this actually looks like, because there's no choice here. They even admit there's no choice when it comes to pushing abortion in their Hollywood propaganda in shows like Tell Me Lies. So this is from the creator, Megan Oppenheimer. And she says, I have pretty much only seen abortions depicted as a heavy, complicated decision. And certainly that can be the case, but it isn't always. Sometimes it's just relief and something that you have to do. If it's something that you have to do, is it a choice? No, it's not. It's something you're forced to do. She says, and I personally think it can sometimes be a gift. Abortion can be a gift to people in certain situations. Specifically because of what's going on in the world right now, I wanted to show abortion as something that could be casual. Casual, just like getting your teeth cleaned. You can have your baby sucked out of you and destroyed, its body destroyed, its life destroyed. And it could even be a victory moment, as weird as that may sound. Yes, it sounds very weird because you're destroying an innocent human life. And this is complicated as a decision because it's the decision to take an innocent life, a son or a daughter, a human being with their whole life in front of them. And it's called choice in order to justify it, but you're saying it's what some women have to do on the other hand. You can't even get your message straight because when we're doing evil things, the justifications will always change. You can't keep your story straight when you're doing evil things or promoting evil things because evil does not make sense. Evil does not make sense. Killing a baby ultimately does not make sense. It's against what's best for that baby, and it is against what's best for that mother because committing that moral black mark on your soul, that moral wrong, that evil only hurts your soul and leads to lifelong problems for the mother. There's a ton of research showing about how women who have abortions are more likely to commit suicide, are more likely to struggle with infertility, are more likely to struggle with addictions, are more likely to struggle with mental health issues. The data shows that. Of course, Hollywood is going to hide that, and this very dishonest writer of this TV series is going to hide that as well. Let's take a look at a scene that they're promoting. This is like a promo clip now for the season of this show. And Planned Parenthood is literally posting this on their Instagram to celebrate the show. But it's very dark and it's also very dishonest. And you'll see why when we watch it. Let's take a look. So this is a clip from the Tell Me Lies video or TV series that's going to be coming out. Let's take a look.
There's actually something I need to talk to you about.
Okay, what is it?
Diana's pregnant. And yeah. But Molly says she already scheduled an abortion. So, good.
You fucking kidding me? When is she doing that?
I don't know. I could probably find out, though.
Hey, I don't think you should be telling Steven this.
Why wouldn't you tell me?
Isn't this Diana's private business?
No, it's my business too. It would be my kid or whatever.
Kid? It's just a clump of cells at this point. And what, you want to be a dad? You want to be someone's father?
No, but that's not the point. She's making a huge decision without consulting me first.
I mean, what would she consult you about? I don't think she needs your permission. It's kind of up to her.
Well,
Okay. So this is a clip and they're trying to, this clip is supposed to, like Planned Parenthood has this on their Instagram. They want this clip to be like, oh, look how great abortion is. And of course the father of the baby is just a loser. It's not a baby. And the father, you know, you're not allowed to say father though, because it's not a baby in their world, but this man involved, right, is just a lowlife basically and a controller of women. I mean, let's just unpack what we just saw. So the boyfriend is being told by someone else, oh, she's pregnant. And he's like, oh my gosh, right? And then he's kind of made to look like a jerk. Like, well, why didn't she tell me? I don't even know if I want to be a father. But why didn't she tell me? Like grumpy about it. So he's like a jerk is the kind of message, right? And so he doesn't deserve to even know that his child is about to be murdered via abortion. Like he doesn't even deserve to know. That's Planned Parenthood's message. Like if you are a father of a baby, you don't even deserve to know that that baby exists. And you don't deserve to have any role in protecting that baby's life unless mom doesn't choose abortion. And then you're on the hook for childcare or for child support and everything else. Like that is the world of Planned Parenthood. Men have no rights. Men have no rights. They only have responsibilities and they have no legal right to protect their baby. Now on the woman's side, it's complete nonsense, right? Because they're saying, oh, they're saying on the one hand, like it's something you have to do, but then they're claiming it's a choice. And notice how like the third guy in that clip, he says, oh, it's just a clump of cells. Like they're still using that, guys. Come on. That's so 1990s pro-abortion activism, but it's back. It's back. Oh, it's a clump of cells. Just a clump of cells. Why do you care? You are a clump of cells, sir. Whoever that actor is, I am a clump of cells. We are all clumps of cells. We are composed of cells. Yes, we are all made of cells. A baby in the womb is made of cells. You are made of human cells and you're a unique individual human organism. You are a human life. And the science is crystal clear on that about a life in the womb. So this dehumanizing language that they're putting very purposefully in their Hollywood propaganda here is to try to dehumanize the baby. It's not working. You are a clump of cells. I am a clump of cells. You're still a human life. And it's also so anti-science. It's so funny that this side that often claims that people who are pro-life or who support, human dignity are anti-science, when the most anti-science thing you can be is a pro-abortion activist who says that there's nothing special about that developing life in the womb scientifically, that it is not the same as a unique human life outside of the womb. Because why? There's no good reason, just because it's dependent. That's the reason, right? So the propaganda here is so overt. And the other thing that I thought was really interesting is there are so many cases, we report on this at Live Action News, of deadbeat boyfriends or even sometimes husbands who actually force their girlfriend or their partner to have an abortion. And it's very unusual that they're going to force them to have a baby. Usually those sorts of personalities or men who have abuse issues and things like this, they don't want to have to deal with a new life. They want to destroy a new life. And so Planned Parenthood is also very sneakily just turning the tables and lying directly about what actually happens more often than not. When you're dealing with an abusive man, you're not dealing with an abusive man who's like going to force you to have the baby. You're dealing with an abusive man who's going to force you to have an abortion. But you don't see that narrative in this TV show represented, not one bit. Instead, the kind of semi-abusive boyfriend is like, well, you can't have an abortion. That's not real life. In real life, it's the good man who says, I want to love you and care for you and fight for you, who wants to lay down his life for that baby, for that woman, who wants to marry her, who marries her first. Like that is ultimately the good man. That's what he does. And weirdly, they're making the man who's anti-abortion in the video the bad guy, when actually the anti-abortion man is always the good guy, is going to be the good guy because he's anti-abortion. And when you have an abusive guy, it's usually the guy that is pushing abortion, not rejecting abortion. So it's tired, it's old. I mean, this is Hollywood right now, guys. I mean, there's so much good stuff happening too, like with Angel Studios and with all of these new TV series that are coming out that are, I think, revitalizing the arts and entertainment. But there's a lot of junk, and Planned Parenthood is at it. They are at it right now. Okay, I'm going to take a look at the chat now. I got a note that the chat was paused because of the nature of this episode. YouTube is already flagging this episode, surprise, surprise, because we're discussing suicide. This is the problem, guys. You talk about this stuff and you're not allowed to even discuss it. It's interesting. The reason that YouTube is flagging it, there's some good behind that, because they know suicide's bad. They don't want young people to take their lives. They don't want anyone to take their lives. But we're talking about how it's legal to kill yourself in America and Canada, and that doctors are helping people do it. I mean, I don't even know if YouTube knows this. They must know this. So if anything, this video should get extra support by YouTube if they're really against suicide, because that's what we're doing here. Obviously, we're against suicide. We're trying to fight for life instead of to take life. Okay, let's take a look at some of these comments. This is from Helene. I live in Canada. I've been this for a while. I've seen this for a while now, and I'm aghast at how many people who call themselves Christians and Catholics who accept this, never mind the mainstream. That is very scary. We definitely need to educate ourselves as people of faith. We can never support the taking of an innocent life. Like, suicide is not God's design. Abortion is not God's design. None of this should be allowed by law. Shannon says, this is horrific. Never apply to MAID if a person changes their mind. MAID will still try to kill you if the relatives want this. It's evil. She also says, is the doctor's oath gone? First, do no harm. It seems like a thing of the past. Exactly. I mean, I believe do no harm became a thing of the past when we permitted abortion. We permit the killing of babies. We're going to get the killing of adults. This is what the Catholic Church has been warning against for decades. Humanae Vitae, in an encyclical written by a Catholic Pope, it talks about how you allow the destruction of life in the womb. You open the floodgates to destruction of life at all ages of life for any vulnerable human being. Another comment from Mill, what does Massey think about abortion? I've looked into him, but I've only heard a few anti-Trump conservatives talk about him. We actually invited Representative Thomas Massey on the show to talk about the Epstein files. He has declined so far. He was busy. We're going to continue to invite him on, of course. I don't know. I haven't seen him speak much about abortion. I think he is pro-life. That's a great question, and we will look into that more. I think if you're especially a representative right now in Congress, you need to be passionately pro-life, because they're going to try to restart the funding of Planned Parenthood this year. Last year, they defunded the biggest abortion chain, Planned Parenthood, for 1 year in the Big Beautiful Bill. On July 4th this year, which is the 250th anniversary of this country. July 4th is the 250th anniversary of this country. That's when they're going to press restart on Planned Parenthood's funding. So the biggest abortion chain is going to get hundreds of millions of your taxpayer dollars if that happens. So we need people like Massey and others to work really hard to make sure that defund happens and we are not funding the biggest abortion chain, Planned Parenthood, after July 4th. So we can all pray for that and work for that. All right, you guys, thank you so much for joining in for today's live. Please pray for the protection of life in the womb and outside of the womb. Pray for the conversion of our elected officials, including Gavin Newsom, and please pray for me. Thank you all, and I'm praying for you. God bless you guys.